welcome to part 2 of our episode B complex vitamins and your brain. In the first part of the episode, we spoke about the effects of vitamin B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, and B7 on the brain. Now we're going to talk about folate, which is B9, and Cobalman, which is B12. And these vitamins are involved with everything that occurs in your body. Now, before we talk about these two specific B vitamins, we have to talk about the effect they have on an important amino acid. It requires these B vitamins for it to function properly. Amino acids make us. They also allow us to function. Amino acids come from the digestion and metabolism of protein. Amino acids are strung together, and this is what makes all protein. So you're made out of protein. One of these amino acids is methionine. It's derived from the digestion of protein from your food. It's an important sulfur-containing amino acid. Methionine improves the tone of our skin and the pliability, the elasticity, and the youthfulness of our skin. Also our hair. It strengthens our nails. It's involved with detoxification processes in our liver and kidneys and lungs. It gets rid of toxins. The sulfur provided by methionine protects our cells from pollutants, such as the things we inhale, such as auto exhaust. It slows down cell aging, and it's essential for the absorption and the availability of selenium and zinc. Selenium and zinc are involved with so many things in our body. Methionine attaches to and removes heavy metals in a process called chelation, so it removes things such as lead and mercury and arsenic, aiding their excretion. It's also a lipotrophic factor, which means it prevents a buildup of fat in the liver. If you have a big belly, elevated triglycerides in your blood, elevated blood sugar, you probably have some fat buildup in your liver. Methionine helps prevent this. But you require B complex vitamins to properly control the metabolism of methionine. So for methionine to do all the good things it does, it requires 3 different B complex vitamins, B6, which we already spoke about, and now we're going to discuss B12 and folate. And a lack of B12 or folate leads to an elevation of an amino acid called homocysteine. It's made out of methionine. If you lack B12 and folate, methionine will exist as homocysteine, and that's bad for you. It's important to discuss homocysteine because if it's elevated, it's a proxy for, we would call that a marker for inflammation. And when homocysteine's elevated, it inflames our brain. It's connected to depression, shrinkage of the brain that occurs with aging. We call it mild cognitive impairment, with memory loss. It's likely also connected with dementias, including Alzheimer's dementia. So methionine is not the bad guy here, but rather it's a lack of B vitamins. That's not good. And methionine can't be changed all the way into what it's supposed to do, and it exists as a halfway point, a metabolite called homocysteine. You could test for homocysteine. Homocysteine is a common amino acid in your blood. Everybody has it. But that doesn't mean when it's elevated it's a good thing. High levels of it are linked to early development of heart disease and also over time issues with our brain. Abnormally high levels of homocysteine, it's called hyperhomocysteinemia, in your blood serum above 15, it's a medical condition because it's a significant risk factor for the development of a wide range of diseases. Blood clots, psychiatric conditions, including depression and shrinkage of the brain, bone loss, increased risk of fractures, increased risk of hip fracture. That's a very dangerous scenario. Most labs report a normal range of homocysteine between 4 and 15. So it depends on the lab. You have to look at what's their acceptable range because it depends on the type of testing they do and the sensitivity of their testing. So welcome to our B complex vitamins on your brain part 2 of the episode, looking at the effects of the B complex vitamins B12 and folate in your brain and also the homocysteine hypothesis. Before we go into this, my name is Jerry Hickey. I'm a pharmacist who also has studied nutrition. I'm over here at Invite Health. I'm also the scientific director. And I'm going to talk about what these vitamins do for your brain and your body. Please make sure you subscribe to the Invite Health podcast today and leave us a review. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. All of the information on today's episode will be linked in the episode description, and you can visit invitehealth.com/podcast for more info. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back, and we'll discuss the implications of low folate and low B12 and what this does to your body and your brain.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
Okay, welcome back. In the 1960s, homocysteine was discovered and connected to damage to our blood vessels. In fact, in 1969, a doctor named Dr. Kilmer McCulley reported out children born with a genetic disorder called homocysteinuria, where you get high levels of homocysteine in the urine, which means there's high levels in the body, causes homocysteine levels to be extremely high. And these kids, they developed heart disease, hardening of the arteries in their arteries at a very young age. In fact, it was very dangerous for them. Homocysteine levels in the blood may be elevated for many reasons. More specifically, these reasons can be divided into severe genetic causes, such as in these children, or other milder causes, such as lacking B vitamins. And you typically manage it, you lower it with vitamin B6 or vitamin B9, which is the folate, and vitamin B12, which is Cobalman. A high level of homocysteine in your blood makes a person more prone to damage to the blood vessel walls. The endothelial cells lining the blood vessels get injured. This leads to inflammation in the blood vessels, which in turn leads to clogging of the arteries, atherogenesis. This results in poor blood flow to your heart, injury to your heart. High levels of homocysteine in the blood is a possible risk factor, definitely connected with heart disease and coronary artery disease. That's the biggest killer on the planet. Coronary artery disease occurs when a plaque builds up, blocking the flow of blood to your heart. Your heart's not getting enough oxygen, quite dangerous, leads to ischemic events. When you see elevated homocysteine, it's correlated with blood clots, heart attacks, strokes. So once again, it's not clear whether the elevated homocysteine itself is causing the damage or it's a proxy for something else. Now, studies show that sometimes elevated homocysteine on its own is not a serious issue unless it's accompanied by other risk factors for heart disease or diabetes, such as elevated uric acid or elevated blood pressure or elevated blood sugar or elevated triglycerides. And when this happens, the elevated homocysteine truly becomes dangerous. But it's never a good thing to have elevated levels of homocysteine in your blood. Now, there's definite correlations between elevated homocysteine and poor brain function. A number of modern meta-analysis of data from more rigorous, as far as the methodology, recently published human clinical trials, they show that there's really a connection. It's a notable connection. And they found that a series of studies involving samples of elderly adults, a clear relationship between elevated homocysteine and dementia. This was published in the American Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry. And they did meta-analysis of these studies, which shows this was real. A prospective study, elevated homocysteine in the blood showed a 35% increased chance of eventually developing Alzheimer's disease. And that was according to 8 studies. It's published in the journal Alzheimer's and Dementia. And a 50% greater chance of suffering with clinically significant cognitive decline. This was according to 14 studies published in the European Journal of Neurology. Interestingly, at the other end of the lifespan, a single study showed that giving folate, having enough folate in the diet, adolescents did better academically. Now, no description of the mechanisms of action of the B vitamins is complete without talking about homocysteine. And this originally stemmed from the observations that elevated levels of homocysteine in between meals, because fasting plasma levels is connected to uh, a predictor of heart disease, cardiovascular disease. Now, they've seen this in epidemiological studies, prospective studies, clinical studies, case control studies. But subsequently, this was extended to problems with cognitive function, even Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. So, in essence, the homocysteine hypothesis, attributed to mild to moderate increases in homocysteine, became a cause célèbre, a contributor to disease states, including damage to your brain. Now, it has teeth. Elevated homocysteine leads to inflammation, damage to our genetic material, the malfunction of important neurotransmitters in our brain that affect our mood and lead to depression and anxiety, and also damage to the memory. So there's teeth to the homocysteine hypothesis. So let's talk about folate and B12. These are complementary in their roles. A deficiency in B12 results in folate not working. So functionally, folate is not working. So you basically have a functional folate deficiency because folate becomes trapped as an intermediary called methyl tetrahydrofolate. It's not working. This leads to a reduction in what we call methylation. That protects our genes and makes our genes work. Methylation, these B vitamins contribute methyl groups to our genes, and that makes the genes safe and stable and lets them function. So what happens when you don't have the folate and the B12, you can't properly methylate your genes, and this prevents the formation of memory. This prevents the formation of new brain cells, repairing the brain. So it promotes shrinkage and hardening of the hippocampus. That's the part of your brain strongly involved with your memory, learning and memory. A lack of myelin production. Myelin covers it's a sheath that covers your nerves going up your spine, and when you're not making myelin, well, that's the same as multiple sclerosis. There's pain, there's problems with the brain. You also can't integrate phospholipids into your brain cell, which means you're not going to have memory. I mean, it just means your brain is not going to work. Now, also, when you lack folate, B9, you can't convert the amino acids from protein into neurotransmitters. You can't create serotonin. Without serotonin, you can't control your appetite. You can't prevent depression. You can't prevent anxiety. You can't handle stress. You can't make melatonin at bedtime. Without melatonin, forget it. So many things go wrong, but you also can't sleep well. You can't create dopamine. Dopamine allows you to learn what's good for you and what's not good for you. You can't make norepinephrine. Norepinephrine allows you to focus on things. You might know norepinephrine as noradrenaline. You can't make epinephrine, which is also called adrenaline, so you can't get away from trouble. You also can't make enough nitric oxide in your brain. In other words, there's going to be poor circulation in your brain. If you lack these B vitamins, you develop all kinds of neurological and psychiatric symptoms. For instance, if you lack B12, if you lack B6, you develop depression, cognitive decline, dementia. B12, if you lack B12, you not only do you get enlarged red blood cells, so you get hematological changes, but you also get, besides anemia, you get neuropsychiatric symptoms. Now, a number of studies show that 10 cross-sectional studies and one prospective study published in the journal Aging and Mental Health shows that if you lack B12 and you lack folate, you develop depression. An analysis of 10 cross-sectional studies and 3 cohort studies showed that if you're low in folate, you develop cognitive impairment and you have just a drop in mental functions in general, and your memory suffers. This was published in the Journal of Aging and Health. And a more sensitive analysis of studies, a subset of studies, looking at vitamin B12, B12 was connected to dementia and a decline in cognitive function. This was shown in the journal Epidemiological Reviews. It was a more restricted meta-analysis. Shows that they're really important. So let's go to some studies. Here's a review of a number of human clinical trials showing that if you lack B12 and folic acid, you develop depression. Now, I want to get into more concrete evidence. So here's the Tufts University. They have a Center for Researching Aging. It's the Gene Meyer USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University. And they're looking at B12 and brain aging. And they found that having just a mild deficiency of vitamin B12 puts an older adult at a much higher risk of having cognitive decline. It actually accelerates cognitive decline. Over time, their many mental state exam decline more rapidly. Your many mental state exam is like basic questions about memory and brain function and brain health. So they saw that there's a pretty drastic decline in brain function that's accelerated when you lack B12. Now, here's a study from Oxford University, one of the leading universities on planet Earth. It's from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And they found in a group of elderly people that lacking B12 and B6 and folate is a terrible thing. These people had mild cognitive impairment. Mild cognitive impairment happens in up to like 20 to 25% of people, elderly people. The brain has shrunk, their memory's suffering. They have trouble understanding directions when you try to explain how to use their cell phone or their GPS, etc. And it's a prodromal stage before Alzheimer's disease. Most people who develop this type of brain shrinkage with memory problems will eventually drift into Alzheimer's disease, about 80% of them. So the lead researcher was a Dr. David Smith from Oxford University. Here's what he found. In those with elevated homocysteine levels, now these are his words, the specific areas of the brain associated with Alzheimer's disease shrank 8 times more slowly if they gave them B vitamins versus placebo. That's unbelievable. So these people had mild cognitive impairment, they had shrinkage of the brain, they had memory issues, true memory issues. If they gave them B vitamins, the parts of the brain that are damaged in Alzheimer's disease shrank 8 times more slowly simply giving them B vitamins. He goes on to say this is strongly indicative that the B vitamins may be substantially slowing down or even potentially arresting the disease process in those with early stage cognitive decline. This is the first treatment that has been shown to potentially arrest Alzheimer's disease related brain shrinkage. Now, this is true. There's been a number of studies showing that, especially in the presence of fish oils, it seems that B vitamins and fish oils interact. When you have sufficient B vitamins and fish oils in the brain, there's a slower deterioration of mental functions in the brain in people who have real memory problems, including those with mild early stages of Alzheimer's disease. They just hold on to their brain function longer. But having sufficient B vitamins is also connected to a lower risk of having a stroke, another major problem with the brain besides Alzheimer's disease and dementia and shrinkage of the brain and mild cognitive impairment. What's the other big scary thing with the brain? A stroke. So this is the journal Neurology. It's all about the brain and brain research. And they want to see, is there really an effect of B vitamins as a supplement? Does it really affect your risk of a stroke? So they looked at 14 randomized controlled human clinical trials that involved 55,000 people. All the studies compared using B vitamin supplements to a placebo. And they found that those taking B vitamins definitely had a reduced risk of suffering with a stroke compared to those taking a placebo or just getting a low dosage of B vitamins from their food. So this is a meta-analysis. They found that the B vitamins, B6, B12, folic acid, that lower homocysteine significantly reduce your risk of having a stroke. A meta-analysis is when they take high-quality studies that are looking at the same thing. They're examining the same thing, in this case, lowering homocysteine, giving B vitamins, and the risk of stroke. And this tells you when you put all this together, you have more people, you have more researchers. It tells you if something either works or it doesn't. And in this meta-analysis, B vitamins absolutely worked. They absolutely reduced your risk of having a stroke. So the meta-analysis I just discussed was based on 14 studies published in the journal Neurology. This is a different review. It's in the journal Clinical Nutrition, a very dependable journal. And it's 19 randomized controlled human clinical trials involving 48,000 people. The last review included 55,000 people, if I remember correctly. And once again, they found giving a B vitamin supplement, folic acid, B6 and B12, strongly reduced the risk of stroke. There's no doubt that taking a B complex supplement is very good for your brain. It's especially important in older people, and logically, for some reason, it's very important if you have elevated homocysteine levels in your blood. So thank you for tuning into the Invite Health Podcast. You can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Please make sure you subscribe and please leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. We'll see you next time on another episode of the Invite Health Podcast, and thank you so much for listening.